Alright, I'm going to be trying to analyze the two games I played against Cyber Odin in the Salamence tournament. I went 0-2. Do not like that I went 0-2, that I didn't even manage to take a single game off of him, even though he's Cyber Odin. I know he's a well-respected ADV player. I had no idea how well he would play in Gen 4, but if you're good in one tier, you're probably decent at the others. So that probably played into part of the reason why I had major nerves in this tournament. It's also the fact that this is the first tournament I've entered in a very long time. So I had a personal pressure to perform as well. So the first game here, which is actually the second one that he linked on the DPP tournament, like of the two replays he linked in the thread. Don't know why. In this game, I had brought a team with a mixed DD mence of DD Outrage, Draco, and Fire Blast with the intention of getting in early, Dragon Dancing up, using Fire Blast or Draco on the switch-in to mence, just roasting them, and then have Outrage break holes. This is not meant to sweep, this is just meant to terrorize the opposing team, and then have the rest of the team essentially clean up with Offensive Starmie, Doug Trio, Scarf Nate, Band Sizer, who I think does get significantly better in a Salamence metagame, since its priority becomes a bigger factor when dealing with plus speed DD mences, because base 100 Scarfers needs to run Jolly, which only like Zapdos can consistently run, or safely, or it can like to run. The rest really want Adamant or Modest. So just priority becomes a bigger deal, and Sizer is, as anyone who played when mence was current meta would know, Sizer is the king of taking a hit and wrecking the setup sweeper. And combined with a bulkier Rachi to deal with Lucario and such, and just set rocks at the beginning, just having some general contingency, I figured this team had enough of a contingency backbone to get away with that being its sole defensive prowess. There's also the benefit of like Spin Starmie plus mence being mence. It can switch in. It has some sort of bulk. It has Intimidate. It can switch into a fighting type move if needed. And I did kind of factor that into this team. There's nothing that is fighting weak, but Starmie is my only other fighting resist. So that is the team I brought for this game. Intention of just Doug Trio trapping any steal and cleaning up mence's mess. Once the steal's gotten rid of, mence can Dragon Dance up and can safely hit an answer with Fire Blast, rather than having an answer like Heatran switch in that couldn't take an Earthquake but can take a Fire Blast. And just using contingency options to clean up from there. It's not the best team, but these two teams were the most confident I had built, or the teams I had most confidence in, which again isn't a very high mark, but it was the best I had, and I was not going to just ask someone else for a team. That doesn't sound quite right to me. I'm not fully learning the metagame for this, and half the reason why I got into this tournament was so I could essentially learn or figure out how mence would affect this meta. Just what kind of repercussions that would have, and so like what would I need to prepare for that wasn't just mence, because it was obvious that mence is going to have like 95% usage. Anyway, the first game here, hold on, there we go. Okay, this first game, he leads a Heatran against my Jirachi. So, well, I kind of revealed what I was going to do there, but this is an annoying matchup for me since Heatran is one of the things I want, like the thing I want to trap a Dugtrio on this team, but I do have U-turn on my Jirachi, but Heatran, Jirachi's faster than Heatran, which means if I try to just U-turn Doug, it's the same as if I was hard switching in Doug, and it's just going to get roasted by a Fire Blast. Jirachi would also get roasted by a Fire Blast, but I did not calc this, which is absolutely a fault of my own. If I'm not 100% confident in a calc, I should calc it until I've calced it enough that I'm 100% confident in the result without calcing it. I was confident that I would be able to survive a 252 Fire Blast. Would take like 75 or 80% or something. Be able to get that health back up later with leftovers. Still have enough health to check potential Lucarios. And so I ended up going for a Stealth Rock as opposed to U-turn or trying to pivot into a Fire Resist as well. Also, my two Fire Resists were Salamence, which I did not want to reveal yet, especially since it couldn't deal with Heatran. Although that would have been an amazing bluff, I was not going to do that, like, turn 1 of a tournament game. And my second option, well, I technically had two other options, Starmie and Infernape. But Infernape would have revealed that he was Scarf pretty early on, and I did not want to do that. And Starmie, I felt, would get more, like... Starmie would force Heatran out if it successfully got in. What I would have wanted out of a pivot was to find a way to safely get Dugtrio in. And I didn't necessarily have a safe option for that. Again, if I had switched Infernape in, and he was confident I was going to your turn, and he stayed in, then that would have been a good way of achieving that, but again, I don't believe that was something practical I could have taken. So I figured I will just set rocks, and if he switches out, fearing a raw Doug switch in, and like he's a Spidef variant or something that wouldn't be able to KO with Fire Blast, then sure. If Rachi goes down, then I at least get rocks, which is better than not having rocks. I also gain extra info by essentially burning the turn on something that is non-committal, while, well, no, that's not a good way of approaching it. So yeah, I am not 100% confident I made the wrong play here, but I definitely paid for it, since he was Overheat and got a crit, which simplified my game plan quite a bit. Rachi goes down, Doug comes in, Doug Earthquakes. So, technically, I got Heatran out of the way for Salamence. Jirachi managed to get rocks down before it died, so even though I lost a good bit of contingency, and even though I'm letting something come in and punish Doug, I at least still got rocks down, and I have some contingency left with the rest of my team to be able to react to whatever punishment he came out with. And this is another mistake I made during this game. I made no attempt to extrapolate his team from his lead. I know, like, Heatran as a lead is not exactly the most committal of leads in terms of, like, oh, it's used on this type of team. It's not like Machamp, where you can just kind of more easily figure out things like, okay, it's going to have confident, like, Gyarados answers in the back. It's going to want to try and get an early jump on, like, an early jump on the game, potentially trying to get rid of a Mon that is commonly used in a lead slot, or just things like that. because no one runs it for just raw good stuffs. There's always a purpose. And for this one, I didn't necessarily know what that was. I know that the lead position is very commonly used as a sponge, I'm forgetting the term now. A crumple zone, where if shit hits the fan, you can afford to get rid of it, to sack it, because there's a very good chance that being in the lead position, it's going to go down to an earthquake or a fighting type move, if you want rocks down like that. Because once you cede the lead position, then suddenly you're on the back foot. Unless you're confident that they're going to set down rocks and you're confident in your ability to remove them, which is not common in current meta, then you generally don't want to do that as a common game plan, only as a contingency of a game plan. And so for Heatran, it's hard to tell, again, because of that whole crumple zone bit. All that can be really derived from it is that there is almost certainly going to be some sort of ground immunity, and that's going to be what's coming in to punish Dugtrio. But I didn't necessarily think of that in my head. I was just literally waiting for him to bring out the Mon to punish to see what I could react. I was playing very, very reactively this game. I did not try to look into his team at all. I did not try to outplay him. I just simply tried to just look one turn ahead and that's it. And that is almost certainly one of the major reasons I lost this game. Or lost the set entirely. So he goes down and Latias comes out. Latias is almost certainly not the only ground immune he has on this team. That's generally the nature of Latias teams. It's never only one immune. Just because Latias isn't a consistent answer to that, even bulky defensive variants just won't like switching into the physical moves that commonly come with Earthquake carriers. So in the case that it's predicted, then it is not usually in the best position, especially if it is a choice variant. But again, I didn't necessarily think of that right now. All I thought was, okay, Latias is going to Draco. I need to tank that Draco. Because I figured, okay, he is absolutely going to Draco. If it's going to wreck Dugtrio. If I have a secondary steal, because I'm unlikely to have 3 steals, then I'm forced to reveal my steal here, if he does so. It does put him on the back foot, but looking at a team of Virachi Doug, he could very well think I'm some sort of, clef fat shit. With, Wish Mence. Which I do have a Wish Mence team, I did not use it. Mostly because I'm not sure if it's actually that good. It's an interesting set, but... Or the team, that is. I didn't think was that good. So, I only really had one other option here. So I went Sizer to tank it, but he double switched, which again, I wasn't thinking of that track. I was thinking, okay, he's going to try and get info, so he's just going to drop Draco to do so. I figured he had the type of team that was bulky enough with Heatran and Latias to be able to get away with purposefully getting rid of the momentum in order to gain info like that. But instead he doubles into Breloom, which sucks. One of the predictions I had made with the changing of the metagame was that Breloom would fall in usage, primarily because Salamence is a fantastic switch-in. It can run a Sleep Talk set. It can. It probably doesn't prefer it, but does any Sleep Talk user prefer using Sleep Talk if they aren't Rest Talk? So it could very well be a switch in just as well as like CP Dragon Knight, if better because of Intimidate. There would be more Doug Trios around because it would just be able to Sucker Punch the Salamences that pop up, or just getting rid of trance and such for Mence, so it can kind of deal with Mence. It can deal with Mence's answers. Even Latias, if Latias gets too low or something, it can Sucker or Pursuit, or play real mind games of like Crit of Stone Edge or something. I'm not really selling it well, am I? Well, it can Pursuit weaken the Latiases, especially bulkier sets that put their remaining EVs into SPDEF instead of defense. Again, I have not calced that. I probably should. But actually, yeah, I'm going to do that right now. /calc. I don't know if this looks good enough. Whatever. Latias, Choice Scarf, Doug Trio, Physical Attacker, Choice Band. This is not the set you run. You run 224 for Scarf Tar. Oops, wrong one. And yeah, it can tank a Scarf Draco, which kind of forces the Pursuit. And this would be base 80. Really, this doesn't sound right. Pursuit not killing Latias. I guess Latias is bulky and it's not stab, and it's base 80 attack even with the band. But that's still going to be enough. Probably. Anyway, I tangented. Back to this scenario. This is not the best position for me to be in, since the point that I was trying to get at with predicting that Braylon was going to lower in usage is that I thought I could, especially for this tournament, with like 95% Mence usage, that I could get away with not having a Sleep Absorber. And that's kind of my fault for not planning for that, but I figured if there was any scenario where I could get away with not using it, it would be this tournament. And that's coming back to bite me in the ass immediately. The way this team generally deals with Loom is to maneuver a Doug Trio into Loom and aerial ace it. But it doesn't really have much to tank Sleep. And, well, this scenario in and of itself is interesting since I have not revealed Sizer's set yet. It could be Scarf, a Scarf U-turn. It wouldn't appreciate, although it wouldn't kill, it would be Band that kills. But if I recall correctly, they are also both the same speed. Let me double check that real quick. Braylon, I know, is base 70, and Sizer is, no, base 65, never mind. I forget exactly what I did here. I can't remember if I U-turned or if I bullet punched. But no, I bullet punched. I kind of knew that I remember that there was some point where I had tried to test Cyber Odin, like thinking he was banking on extra speed. This was not that scenario, which is a good thing, but I just wasn't sure if it was this or not. So I got good damage on it, but it's a Breloom, and it's a Breloom that's not under sand. So it's going to this is basically chip damage. He gets the Spore off, and honestly, Sizer was the best option on this team I had to take the Sleep. Since it could at least take a hit, it could roll for Sleep wake-ups that had Bullet Punch to be able to actually get a faster attack off when it does wake up. So it can afford to take one less hit. But this is not a good position for me. And again, the way I usually deal with Loom is to trap it with Dugtrio, but my 2 U-turners are out of commission. So I obviously can't switch it in here. If it could substitute, it could seed bomb the Dug switch in, or most likely it could focus punch. It could Sky Uppercut if it had that, but I figured it didn't have that. He could I honestly didn't know what set he had, but I figured it wasn't going to be something like Sky Uppercut or Mach Punch. But that's mostly because I'm used to dealing with bulky looms, or at least bulky set type looms like Sub Punch and Sub Seed and things like that. So, again, like I mentioned before, I have only 2 fighting resists in Starmie and Salamence. Breloom had already burned its sleep, and I figured I got rid of Heatran. I figured, okay, this is the perfect time to turn a bad situation into a good one, use this to switch in Salamence when there's no rocks or sand up, get an Intimidate off, tank the hit, and then threaten the whole Dragon Dance thing from there. And so I switch it in, I Intimidate it, and he Superpower, and he crits. And this is probably the moment where if I were to try and continue playing the game how I wanted to play, I lost. This is when I lost. And unfortunately for me, I did not decide to change up my game plan to accommodate for this. I decided, okay, you know what? I'm going to keep this in to sack. I'm going to Dragon Dance up anyways. And if I get something out of it, I get something out of it. Besides, if it's Mach, then again, it's a sack. If he doesn't, then a lot of Menses are going to have Fire Blast, or at least a Dragon move that will kill Loom. He knows that I got rid of a steal, and that he knows that I have more safety in actually outraging, if that's what I'm running. So I figured this was a safe enough play, and I considered myself behind, which I am. So I figured I kind of needed to take a play like that. And he reveals that he is Mach Punch, which is garbage for me. Since even though I was kind of intending for this sack, it was going to be extremely beneficial if I could actually get something out of this mence. And I don't. So I actually decided not to sack it. I'm surprised at this. No, it's because I figured, yeah, it's at 2% health. It'll die after a single life orb. But there's no sand up. There's no rocks up. So it can come in at 2% health. It can still Dragon Dance up. It can still lure something in with a Draco or Fire Blast. It still has use, even though it's at 2% health. And he knows he cannot afford to let this mence go. If he did not Mach Punch there, that would have been a colossal throw. He is ahead. He had no reason to risk a potential switch in. So I abused that and managed to get a safe switch on Doug. This does get a lot of damage off of Doug, but at least it deals with Breloom, which, again, my team had no good answers for. And I wanted it out of the way as soon as possible. I knew this would probably bring Latios in still, but I still had a full health sizer. Even though it was asleep, it could still tank a Draco. It could still at least force it out, get more info on his team. So Doug goes down to 40% kills. Although, one thing I forgot about now is, obviously I use Aerial Ace. Latios isn't the only thing that's going to be able to punish this. Pretty much anybody on his team is going to be able to punish this. And I kind of accepted that when I did it. I also figured that was the only real option I could have taken there. in retrospect, I probably could have made a play to Starmie. And since it was still ultimately offensive, if Latios wasn't Scarf, then I'd be able to hit that. And a lot of things don't like taking 2 Starmie hits in the first place. So that was honestly probably a better call, even though it left Breloom alive and able to switch out. Probably, again, into Metagross, since Hydro Wing there on my end would have been... I would have been beating myself up over it just constantly. So instead he switches in his Metagross. And Doug can't punish it. Mence can't really punish it with an Intimidate. Hopefully you guys didn't hear that. Again, my best switch here in terms of damage control is probably Sizer and try and burn to sleep. But then again, Mence is at 2% health. I know he has a Metagross. If it has Bullet Punch, which is still ultimately a possibility, then Mence has no chance of baiting the Metagross unless I decide to go for a Raw Fire Blast over a Dragon Dance. Which, now that I have the info, I probably could have, but that also... yeah, no. So, I believe the play I made here was sacking Mence when I should have gone to Sizer and taken the hit. Yeah. And instead of successfully sacking, he sets up Stealth Rock, which is annoying because he gets up rocks for free and still maintains the momentum. At least hopefully, if he does a Bullet Punch now, this is when he would use it. And he does. Which means he only has one coverage move. He has almost certainly Meteor Mash Earthquake. No Explosion, no Rock Slide, no Zen Headbutt, no mixed stuff, nothing like that. Essentially a second, a back lead gross, which, now that I think about it, probably shows that he is very bulky. Especially since he did not reveal any leftovers. I did not notice that in the middle of the game, which is something that you need to notice in the middle of the game, whether something gets lefties or not, especially if it's known for potentially curing lefties. And if I remember right, that comes to bite me in the ass in this game later on. So Mence goes down. This is when I decided to reveal Infernape. It would be able to tank a Bullet Punch. I could U-turn on the Latios. I could Fire Blast the Metagross. Latios doesn't like switch. Again, like I said, Latios doesn't like switching in, and Heatran is down. I figured it would be safe. It would be safe to assume that he probably only has one other Fire Resist, if that. Although, to be honest, having Latios as your sole Fire Resist with a lead, like if your lead Heatran goes down, is not a very good idea. So I probably should have assumed he had another Fire Resist up in the back. I do believe I Fire Blast here instead of U-turn. Especially since I know Doug can't trap Metagross anymore because I revealed Bullet Punch. I can't 100% remember what I did here. Right, I just Fire Blasted. Turns out he doesn't need another Fire Resist because he has Akaberry. Berry. And I get wrecked. And this was kind of when I knew the game's over. There's nothing I can do. Starmie was still ultimately my best bet. Resist Bullet Punch. So I would be able to hit anything on the switch. He should still have a Water Resist back here. Having Loom and Latios, a non-lefties Latios, despite the name. is not your best water resist options. I do reveal I'm lefties here, which is probably why he decides to go straight into Tyranitar. And now this is in an interesting position, because Sizer is still at full health and has not burned a single sleep. But if it does manage to wake up, it likes these odds. It wrecks Tyranitar, it can wreck Latias. Dugtrio also still has a good amount of potential in this game for both. Unless there is some like Gustav shenanigans that are going on, but at that point I probably should just Sucker Punch. I still have no idea whose last is. And to be honest, even now I'm not entirely... If I were to figure it out, to try and figure it out from his revealed 5, I am not sure if I'd be able to. The only confident thing I'd be able to say is that he would have a ground immune. And that's it. Probably something that synergizes well with Latias. Maybe a... Actually, I'm not sure. Definitely not a Rotom. I believe his last year was a Gliscor, which would have made sense. But again, I was not thinking that way in the actual match, which I absolutely should have. And if I did predict the Gliscor, then I probably should have also recognized that this was a potential Dragon Dance Tyranitar instead of the bog standard, like slow, maybe Q-stop, Eevee, like Eevee's bulk to whatever tar. But again, Starmie here doesn't have much else it can do. I believe I just sack it for a Hydro. Yeah. It can also help reveal what item it is. It gets wrecked by Crunch, that makes sense. And it has no leftovers. So it's probably... It wasn't Pasho, which means it could be Chople, it could be Akka, it could be... I don't know, Black Glasses. Or, most likely, it could be Q-stop. At least that was what was going through my head. I figured it wasn't choiced, and I didn't think of any other options at the time. So I figured my best bet was to... Well, honestly, I'm not sure if this was the best play. Going Dugtrio here would have likely been better, because I'd be able to kill T-Tar, unless it was Scarfed, but it showed it was not Scarfed. I should have switched Dugtrio in, Earthquaked, forced Latias to do something, because it revealed his choice, especially if it was Draco, then Sizer just kind of wins. So I choked here by going Sizer instead. I was just being greedy for a sleep wake up. So that was the first guaranteed sleep. And Stone Edge does a lot. I needed to wake up here in the situation I put myself in, and I did not. He hits a second Stone Edge, and that's it from there. And I just Sucker Punched as my best possible option. I still had no idea what his last was. So, that's that game. Which I played absolutely terribly. I'm going to get a drink of water because my mouth is a desert, and then I will move on to the next match. Alright. I am back, and thinking back to the game I just analyzed, I actually forgot what I was going to say, which seems to be in line with everything else that has been happening in the matches, so I guess it fits. Anyway, the second match, I decided to bring what was, at that moment, the team I was the most confident with, since it was, like, game -2, and I kind of needed to eke out a win here in order to stay relevant in the tournament. So I kind of accidentally revealed this in the last one, but this team was supposed to try and take advantage of the uh, decrease in Breloons that I predicted and utilize Breloom. This was, I don't believe the abuse of Breloom was the intention of this team when I built it, but that's what it turned out to be. Breloom was my primary sweeper for stall teams. That was just how I broke stall. And Spore, of course, is always good for offense, even if it isn't carrying Mach Punch. Otherwise, it is a solid, standard core. It still has the Rachi Sizer from the last game. Scarf Latios, a general. I forget exactly what the EVs here do for T-Tar. I believe I copied it from somewhere else. It's something like being able to take two modest specs Latios Dracos. No, I think this was for specs mence Dracos, I think. Which were ultimately the same thing, let's be honest. Just being able to tank both Androx and still being able to hit it. Since Breloom just cannot. Like, I kind of built the pursuit on Dugtrio for Latios for mence, that last team. This one, it's for Loom. Pasha is just so it's more likely to set rocks on Starmie and get rid of Starmie, because again, Eric's Breloom, and appreciate just having rocks down overall. Or just having a rocker that can consistently keep them up against Starmies, which I figured Starmies are going to be everywhere, because they can wreck non-DD mences, and they remove rocks for mence. So I figured they'd jump in both viability and, more importantly, usage, and I would be able to take care of that. This Specs Rotom is, I remember it being timid specifically to check Salamences, because if they were a positive attacking nature, then they're just going to get outspeed and wrecked, or outsped and wrecked. So rather similar to the team I brought before, but more solid under a conventional under a more conventional eye. And oh my god, I just realized I forgot to switch to the better layout for this. I am sorry. Anyway, you get to see the team here. And now I will switch back and go back to the replay. Alright, so this game I thankfully did not go up against the Heatran. I did not need to go through that debacle again. That being said, lead Zapdos is not something that I'm used to. So even now I'm not entirely confident on what that would portray in terms of the rest of the team. So in game, I definitely made no attempts to try and extrapolate his team from it. This Rachi does not carry rocks. And so I figured this is going to be a Specs Zapdos with Heat Wave, if I remember right. I'm going to actually need to be refreshed. Okay, no. Apparently not, since I just went straight for the Ice Punch. Actually, no. I did figure it had Heat Wave, but I also figured, again, that I would have lived, and that the damage on Zapdos to help wear it down and get rid of it for Breloom was much more important to me than keeping the Jirachi alive. I don't think that was a good way of approaching it, of assuming that it was better for me to get rid of Zapdos than to keep Jirachi, especially since Jirachi is one of the two parts of my primary Dragon contingency. But that's how it played out, and he took nothing from that. 0. So he's not Specs. Like, I don't even need to calc that to know that that has defensive investment of some sort. and the discharge kinda proves it, especially since it only does 31. Thankfully, I don't get parried from it. And leftovers, then this is when it was pretty obvious he led a physically defensive Zapdos, which is garbage for me. But at the same time, it did help justify the Ice Punch I made earlier. Because even though it can roost, I definitely want damage on this as much as possible. So I go for a U-turn, switch straight into Rotom Heat. I figured it was going to discharge again. Hopefully I don't get parried. I resist it, and I manage. And I will reveal his ground because he's 100% having a ground if he's leading an electric type. Especially or if he's leading Zapdos. It's gonna bait in electrics, or non-Zapdos electrics, and they're gonna be using their electric stab on it. And so if he stays in, Zapdos is wrecked. I love it. If he switches out to his ground, I gain more info. And he knows I am not going to click anything else but Thunderbolt. Which means if he does have a T-Tar, unless it has a lot of SpDef investment, he's not just going to raw switch it in either. If he knows. So he crits, which sucks, since it was supposed to resist, but oh well. I get major damage on it, and instead of roosting, he Toxics, which I personally am fine with for the most part, since again I still have my Breloom for bulky stuff. If he's leading a physically defensive Zapdos, that means he brought bulky stuff. So Breloom, as long as I play my Breloom well, then I have a good chance of winning this, especially now that I have good amazing damage against Zapdos. If I can manage to force it out and set up rocks, then it's nullified, and Breloom will have a field day. Well, comparatively, as opposed to when Zapdos was alive. So I hard switch in T-Tar, thinking he's probably not going to Toxic again. He's going to switch out, fearing the second Thunderbolt. Because he knows it's important for me to get rid of Zapdos, just from hard switching in my Rotom and hitting it with a Spec Thunderbolt. He has to know that if I were to make a play like that, that getting damage on Zapdos is very important to me. So, again, he could roost here, but that would be risking Zapdos' life. So I figured he's going to switch out. I just get in my rocker as soon as possible. And this is when he reveals his ground. Which, again, is not fun because I'm a T-Tar, but at the same time, T-Tar is Pasho, so I can tank a Waterfall, if that's what he decides to go for. Earthquake is a little bit risky for him, since I can just pivot right back into Rotom. And even though I reveal I was Heat, it could still absolutely carry Will-O-Wisp. I'm pretty sure Specs Wisp is a thing. It could carry Trick, which it would enjoy. Although, this being a Mence meta, this is likely a Tank Pert with Ice Beam, as opposed to any of the other types, so it could at least utilize Specs with its Ice Beam, or a Hydro, or a Surf, but I forget exactly what I do here. Yeah, I just set up rocks. Zapdos was too important for me. I was completely okay with T-Tar taking damage here. I'm not sure if this was the good play or not, since now it can't really deal with Starmie, it can't really deal with Latios. Those are two things I also kind of want to get rid of, just as much as Zapdos. If he's running a Phys-Def Zapdos, he's going to be running a Starmie. I'm not sure which type, probably just the bulky spin and max HP, max speed with Ice Beam, but again, I could not afford to, well, maybe. I'm not sure if this is the right play, but it's the play I made. And thankfully, I did not really get punished for it. He only sets up rocks, which I appreciate. I don't appreciate them, but in this scenario, I probably in the moment, I preferred him setting up rocks than hitting me hard, because T-Tar can still actually do all the things I listed earlier. And so now I figured, okay, the waterfall is coming, the earthquake is coming, the something is coming. I'm not going to look a gift horse in the mouth. I am going to switch into Rotom to not reveal any more info to him, and to be able to tank the earthquake, which I figured he was going to go with instead of the water move. Especially if his tank pert is less likely to have waterfall and more likely to have like Surf or Hydro, which would not hit quite as hard on Tyranitar. Oh, no! I can't remember exactly why I did this. Remember what I mentioned about playing the Breloom right before? Yeah. Again, this is probably where I lost this game. Because Breloom was my ticket, and I unnecessarily risked it. I should have switched to Rotom on an Earthquake, even though it got toxic damage. It allowed me to actually pivot around. I figured... You know what I figured here? My team cannot deal with Swampert, specifically because I figured, okay, I have a Breloom. I don't need to worry about Swampert. Because once I set up a Sword Stance, it's wrecked. Unless it's Scarf, and Scarf Pert is not a thing. So I figured, okay, he's 100% going to use a Water move or Ground move. Breloom resists both. This lets me get a Toxic, get my Toxic Orb up. If he's a Tank Pert and decides to Toxic, then that's also a good move. The only move that Loom would not appreciate is Ice Beam, and I figure the chances of him Ice Beaming were exceptionally low. And guess what he does? Guess what he does? He uses his Ice Beam, and Breloom gets wrecked. Again, this is still ultimately a Breloom. This is ultimately still Chip. Even though he's at 15% health. But it's on Sandstorm, so it's definitely more than just the Chip that it was last game. And so I do manage to get a Spore off. Or at least theoretically. In reality, I don't, because he can just sack Zapdos here and get in something faster. And so Loom gets so much damage on it that it can't really safely switch in anymore. So it was probably still my best play to keep it in on the sack in order to get as much health back from Poison Heal as possible. But yeah, he's going to sack, he's going to switch to something faster, and basically I'm boned, is what I'm trying to get at here. He goes to his own Breloom. So that whole thing about Breloom being less popular in this meta has just gone completely down the shitter. In 2 games, there have been 3 Brelooms. And if you probably noticed, with this team, if you look closely, once again, there is no Sleep Talker. Breloom is my best option to take a Spore. I think you know how this is going to go. Remember how I said before how there was a moment where I figured I needed to call his bluff on speed? This is a speedy Breloom. It's not Jolly, it's not Max, but it's 244. And so that's pretty fast. I figured he needs to be either a completely Max or Jolly to be able to outspeed me here, and wreck me. So I stayed in and went for a spore, especially since I figured I needed all of the room I could get at the moment with my Bray Loom. I needed to take risks with the Loom in order to get back into this game. And instead, once again, he brings a Mock Loom. And my Loom gets wrecked. Again, this... I probably should have predicted that it was a Mock, saying he brought a Mock last game. But that was not what my mind was on. My mind was on, he thinks he can outspeed me. He thinks he can outspeed my Spore by thinking that I'm one of the bulkier looms instead of one of the faster ones. And I paid for it. And I don't think there's a way for me to get back into this game from now. Now, at least I get something that can outspeed Loom out before it can use a Spore, which is amazing, but I have no Dugtrio to trap it this time. Rotom was really my best bet to get a 100% force switch on it. And here I figured he was going to switch to Swampert. Because the only two things that I could really threaten were Hidden Power Ice and a potential Overheat. Or a Shadow Ball. Pert likely wouldn't have enjoyed a Shadow Ball, but it also wouldn't have revealed any more of his team to me. Turns out, no, he has a T-Tar, which makes sense. If a T-Tar in this situation was the best switch-in to all three of the above options I listed. And I Shadow Ball for no damage. I don't need to narrate what happens next. Although he does not use Pursuit, which is funny. I mean, again, I don't have very many good... I forget if I had... I did have Iron Head on Jirachi. But I also had no idea what... No, I did know he's Scarf, because he outsped my Rotom. So I knew he was locked into Stone Edge. I apparently did not want to risk my Jirachi since Sizer could threaten a Bullet Punch. Or, more importantly in this case, a U-turn. I still had good health on these two for contingency options, which we have definitely fallen into contingency. And I kind of needed the hard U-turn on this in order to get something back into the game. So I at least get rid of Tyranitar. And like Jirachi was still my best switch in. It couldn't really hit Pert. Honestly, nothing I had hit Pert. I couldn't keep Sizer in, for obvious reasons. Tyranitar gets wrecked. My last is Latias, which would get Ice Beamed, but it would drop a Draco on the Pert. Except if I were to switch in Latias hard, then he wouldn't have switched into Pert. He would have switched into his secondary Latias answer, which he absolutely has. He's not going to rely on T-Tars as only Latias answer, especially in the Mence meta. So I switched to Jirachi, knowing he would switch out to Pert, and I was hoping that I would be able to dance around the Pert and get a situation where I have the Lottie up against the Pert to Draco it. And that's kind of exactly what I'm doing here. I was letting it Earthquake me so I could U-turn into Latias. At least I think. No. Here I thought... No. Honestly, that was ultimately the better play, just to continue U-turning. But I took a risk here, thinking that he's not going to keep his Pert in on the U-turn. Also here, I just realized I have no idea what's wrong with me. For some reason right now I just assumed that the U-turn is going to be slower than Pert to get a safe Lottie switch in. It was more that he's not going to Ice Beam a Jirachi, he's going to Earthquake a Jirachi. Again, I should have still U-turned, but I did not. I figured, okay, Ice Punch would get neutral damage on Pert. If it decided to Waterfall or Earthquake or something, it would hit Breloom if it decided to switch in, which, again, honestly, was not... Overall, this Ice Punch was a terrible call on my part. I'm not sure why I did it. And I understandably get wrecked by an Earthquake. And here's when I figured, okay, he's going to predict a second Ice Punch or something, but no, I go back to the better plan and continue U-turning. I switch to Latios like I should have done before, and now I'm in the position I wanted. He has not revealed a steal yet, which sucks. But at the same time, he's not switching in Breloom here. I can't really Draco, unfortunately, but even though I'm Scarf, well, actually I'm not sure how much Surf would do here. I don't think it would be enough. And I figure... Actually, I can't remember what I thought then. I believe I was... No, then I was only... I was railroaded. I had blinders on. I was just thinking of getting damage on the Pert. Because I needed damage on the Pert. I could not deal with the Pert otherwise. And I just Draco'd. So I Draco, he protects. This is when he would switch in his Steel, but he decides not to. I use Draco, and it misses. So... that's like my one chance of getting back into this game completely gone. Here he is definitely not going to stay in again. Well, no, he does. He tanks it very well, and that's basically my chances for winning this game, going completely down. I kind of needed to hope to outspeed here with a U-turn to get the damage I needed, but that's just a free Earthquake for him. All of this is a free Earthquake for him, so I sack Jirachi, go back to Sizer, and just try and clutch something out with Sizer. It's Sizer versus the world at the moment. Spoiler alert, world wins. I'm forced to go out to T-Tar at this point, which is at a very bad look, because Breloom immediately comes out. And unless Sizer can Oko the last two Mons, one of which is likely to be Salamence, because this is a Salamence tour, and I forgot he just has Mach. It doesn't matter. He outspeeds with Mach and wrecks me. So I played very sloppily both games. I brought subpar teams both games. There's definitely more I could have gotten out of both. Like, even in the analysis of the second game, if you can even call this an analysis, like, I wasn't even going through, like, potential extrapolation of his team to figure out what he had. Like, even now my brain's still not really into it. I'm probably gonna want a second opinion on this, just to make sure that what I'm thinking of, like, is correct, or if things I mentioned are just blatantly false info. But, yeah, I'm not exactly on the right track to learning. Or on learning or improving. But hopefully this will help me engage my brain a little bit more and actually get something out of these lost games. Well, guess that's it for this.